got a Halloween episode of NBL Now thanks to Code Sports, and there's no one better to do it with than one of the best to do it in Australian basketball, and that is Chris Anstey. Chris, happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, Kelsey. I've got the beard going, I've got the pumpkins out, and I'm ready to trick or treat with the little one later on tonight, so looking forward to it.
I love hearing that you celebrate. We had a little bit of a scary game last night and a big Indigenous round coming up that we'll get to shortly. But Derek Ruck has just come out with his top 5 scariest players of all time. I can name them for you, and then if you can just give me any that you would either add or subtract, let me know. Number 5, Drew Mick. Number 4, Brad Dalton. Trez is number 3, maybe surprising to some. 2, Aaron Baines, and 1 is Dean Utoff. Scared?
I'll tell you what, he thinks Trez is scary, does he? And by Drimmick, he must mean Frank Drimmick. No, look, it's funny because when I grew up, it was John Dodge who used to beat the living hell out of anyone and taught me how to play. But it's probably a generational thing too. I thought Ruck might have had a couple in there when there weren't quite as many video cameras around who would quite literally... You were actually worried about what they would do to you. So the 2 I would have right at the very top of the list are Ray Gordon and Grant Kruger, because you had absolutely no idea if they were going to belt the living hell out of you and deal with the consequence later. And they were the guys that got the tough defensive assignments. They didn't have big offensive roles, so they would quite literally be assigned the task to come and beat you up. So those 2 for me and John Dodge. I wouldn't have Drimmick on there. No, I certainly wouldn't have Trez. The others, Dean Utoff, could not move him at all.
Yeah, I love that, Dave. Gone and done the scariest top 5. I love his top 15, but that might be my favorite. Yeah, happy Halloween to Derek Rucker if you're out there listening. Let's talk quickly about the Cairns-Brisbane game last night. It was a little bit ugly. The imports for Cairns really, really struggling. You watched it. Any thoughts?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when you get 24 points from an import trio, you've just got the wrong trio. It's as simple as that. And look, it was a fun game to watch in the first half. The ball moved well, and then it seemed to die for Cairns. But I think, I said to you off air that I don't think this game's going to change the complexity of the league this year, but I was interested and happy to see the growth of the young players at Brisbane. I thought the guy that got the Bullets off to a really strong start was Tane Murray, and the young kids just look like they're playing with a lot more confidence, and maybe that's a little bit like Cairns as well, because I'm not sure they've quite got their import combination right. Now, Casey Prather's one of the best in the league this year, and I think he has to be in MVP conversation. His maturity levels, the quality of game, his decision-making is really, really good. But Brisbane haven't quite figured out the other 2 yet, and Jalen Adams is hit or miss. So for the young kids to come out and be as aggressive as what they were early in a game, and in fact for guys like Jack Purchase to get early relevant minutes and begin developing, I think was a really positive step.
Where do you view Brisbane at the moment? Are they flat track bullies? They went to Perth and got that really big win, but are they coming up against bigger name teams, bigger teams that are doing better? Are they going to compete? Where do you actually see Brisbane this season?
I think in a 10-team league, anyone has to compete or you haven't done your job as a basketball club. So they will compete more often than not. I just don't think they've got that depth of top-end talent to compete with the top. I don't see them challenging for a top 6 spot. I think I'm pretty sure they'll finish ahead of Cairns. And after that, I'm unsure, but they've got a little bit of work to do. And I think once we get another month in, and Mark Worthington he's put a flag in Christmas time, but even before you get to Christmas, I think you've got to make a decision to either invest in the kids and really, really give them a go to see who you build around next year with whatever imports you bring in, or you figure out you're competitive and you keep getting as many minutes you can out of the imports. So they've got a decision to make.
A team who's done very well with their imports by the name of JaVale McGee is Illawarra. They played New Zealand tonight. It's a big chance for Illawarra to get their season back on track. They've sort of been up and down. Will Hickey returns. How are you viewing the start of this one? And is this a must-win for New Zealand as well?
I'm hesitant to ever call a game a must-win this early, but you saw what it meant for Illawarra to get the win in Perth, but for JaVale McGee himself to hit that game-winning free throw. And yeah, we've spoken about him on this podcast quite a number of times, his level of ability, his level of talent. And I think what Illawarra have to find is whether or not that level of talent can contribute to consistently winning. Now, Will Hickey coming back, getting a new import in is all going to help. It's a really important game. I think they're feeling better about themselves. I think they understand each other better. On paper, you ask me the result of this game before the season starts, I tell you that Illawarra win by 15. I don't think they're there yet, but I think Illawarra will find a way to get this one done.
Sam Menenga's had a pretty good start to the season as well. He comes up against JaVale. How does he stop him? Are you looking forward to that matchup, or is that one that McGee dominates?
Well, a little bit of both, maybe. I don't think he stops him inside. Sam Menenga's been playing very well offensively, but, even if you watched his game against Tyrell Harrison or the individual matchup against Tyrell Harrison a few weeks back, as I think we talked about and wanted to do, and they both had incredible games, which was a lot about the offensive ability of each of the boys, but quite a little bit about the lack of ability to defend as well. And there's a bit of a pandemic in the NBL right now, getting raised up and driven by whether it's from the deep post or the perimeter. So he's going to have to stay down against JaVale McGee. He's going to have to do his work early. But more than anything in the area for Sam, I think to take that next step, he's got to rebound. And he has to rebound with JaVale McGee across the entire game. But on the flip side, if he can remove JaVale from the paint and knock down the threes like he did in that game where he had 25 and a half, he's going to be a problem. So it's going to be two completely contrasting styles. But you ask me which one's more sustainable, I probably think it's the way McGee plays in this game.
Lastly, on this game, Illawarra introduced their new import. We've talked about imports. It's been a really big year for the ins and outs. We've seen so many cut already. QJ Peterson should suit up for the game tonight. How do you view what he should be able to bring for Illawarra, and what do they need?
He needs to move the ball, and he needs to give Tyler Harvey the ability to play off the ball more often and be a scorer the second time he touches the ball, have the ball move before it hits Tyler Harvey's hands. So I think that helps him. I just think if you can get Will Hickey back to the bench and driving that bench unit even, and I think he's been really successful in that role, the depth of talent across the entire 40 minutes improved for Illawarra. So two backcourt players helps their depth, and I think just sheer weight of numbers improves the guys around them. So just that alone helps.
We've got a very exciting weekend of hoops ahead. We're going to get to the Sydney Kings in a minute. But Southeast Melbourne and Perth, it's turned into a top four clash. Perth went to Tassie, got that massive win. It's very hard to do down there. Southeast Melbourne are humming at the moment. Is this a game where you see really the identity of Southeast Melbourne and where they sit? Or is it a bigger game for Perth?
It's very well explained on the first part of the question. I think it's exactly if we determine if the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix's personality is real. We said on this last one, they're a little bit grittier, a little bit tougher than what they've been in the past. And playing against Perth, I think you've got a chance to show that. But you have to be able to do that night in, night out. Nathan Sovey's played with more balance and control than he has in the last year or two. I think they've got their import combination closer. They've just been tougher, and the tempo they play at is hard to go with for an entire game. So, look, that means some bad shots. Defensively, they've tightened up, but it's a surprising matchup for me because I wasn't sure each of these two teams would be sitting third and fourth. I thought they might have been battling for, that fourth, fifth place, but really impressed with both teams, really impressed with Jaron Riley. And again, I think it must have been a really difficult situation for head coach John Riley to have his son and probably have known this longer than what we have, but feel that maybe if I play my son in a starting lineup, the optics are going to look so bad. So good on Jaron and good on John for, I think, managing Jaron's role so well and having him contribute to winning so early, then it was almost public demand that he got that starting spot. But he plays like he's been around a long time. And I think I heard an interview with him at halftime or after one of the games where he said, look, Dad's coached me now for 3 months, but he's coached me all my life. So you can absolutely tell that he's the son of a coach.
It's very interesting to peer into a timeout in the Perth Wildcats, the way that John really talks to Jaren. Sometimes it seems like a dad-son combination. It's very interesting to watch, and I absolutely love what Jaren really is doing as well. The other big ups for Perth at the moment is JLA. He seems to have found some form, and Pepper. Pepper's really come in and provided a lot for them off the bench. Where do Perth need to go to enter into that top echelon? Yeah, they're sitting top 4, but you'd probably say they're around the middle rung. They don't sit where Melbourne United and Adelaide sit at the moment. How do Perth accelerate towards that?
I think it's just being together longer and having that group grow together. JLA, you mentioned, has been fantastic. I'm looking forward to when people scout him a bit differently, but very much like Sam Menenga, the evolution or the growth for him is on the glass. You know, as a 7-foot guy who's so long, you can't have 22 points and 3 rebounds. You need to impact the game when you're not scoring the basketball as well. And he can go from having a very, very good year to having an exceptional year if he's double-figure rebounds and impacts the game by finishing possessions and getting second possessions on the offensive end as well. But Elijah Pepper, you mentioned, he's been outstanding, and I think anyone who watches the NBL 1 knows his ability to score, and he's, over the last couple of weeks, found a way to translate that game into the NBL, and to have a scorer of that caliber who is tasked with that exact role to come in and keep the scoreboard ticking over when you set foot on the floor with that second unit's really important, and he's been really great at that the last couple of weeks. So hopefully he's found his feet. Hopefully we see that continually. And if we do that, I think he's someone, if you turn on the television, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, you turn on the television, you look at Elijah Pepper and you go, I can relate to that. He is an absolute normally built human being. And if, for me, the best of that was always Steve Nash. That people could relate more to Steve Nash than they could Shaquille O'Neal because they see themselves like Steve. I think there's a lot of young players out there who would see themselves like Elijah Pepper and take inspiration from him, that if he's able to play at such a high level on the biggest stage this country's got to offer, then I better get to work as well because it's possible. And I think it's a credit to him.
I love Elijah Pepper. I love how he goes about it. He seems to have this inbuilt confidence, but also just goes about it in a really quiet sort of way. So we absolutely love what Pepper's doing at the moment. A huge weekend of matchups. I'm excited for a lot of them, especially Southeast Melbourne and Perth. But Sydney Kings have a really big weekend as well in terms of where they sit in this season. Brisbane versus Sydney on Saturday night. Then they play Melbourne on Monday afternoon. So Kings and Xavier Cooks have had a lot of sort of media attention in the last week, just around unable to close out games, the way that the offense is being run. DJ came out this week on NBL Now and said that people need to get off Xavier Cooks' back and the offense needs to be run through him. What are your thoughts on the Kings and Cooks scenario at the moment, and what's been being said in the media? Is it valid?
My thoughts are that if I'm Brian Gorgian and the greatest basketball coach this country's ever seen, I wouldn't be taking coaching tips from DJ Vasiljevic. But they're going to figure it out, and I'm more worried about what goes on behind closed doors. They'll be having conversations. They'll have ideas. I don't think Xavier Cooks is a point guard. I think he's certainly a guy who can grab it off the board, get a defensive rebound, and get into a second side action, as the terminology that often we use. But Xavier Cooks just needs to impact ball movement and impact scoring as well. Now, he doesn't look like he's playing with a lot of confidence, and sometimes it comes from, you see him on the free throw line. It's not a former MVP standing on the free throw line. It's a guy who's not quite confident in his touch, confident in the flow-on effect by missing shots. He's got a new team around him that he's got to get used to, and I suppose when you do battle from the perimeter, we all know Xavier Cooks isn't a perimeter shooting guy. But when you're missing a really important string to a bow in an offensive skill set and a secondary part's taken away, you can struggle. And he is struggling at the moment. I trust that group to get him out of it. I trust him that he's a good enough player to work his way out of it. The ball's going to move up there. Perimeter guy. We said 3 weeks ago that the more talented guys up there are going to be dependent on the perimeter shooting guys to open up the floor for them. Xavier Cooks needs some space. Matthew Dellavedova needs some space. What I would say about what the media is saying, it's certainly not only Xavier Cooks, it's an entire team who is struggling. Xavier Cooks is just one of the higher profile guys on the team. When it comes to where do they sit across the league, the one comment I do agree with is they've been hamstrung with some of the contracts they've put together because they need another guy. But if what is being said is true, inverted commas, they've overpaid some of the guys who aren't producing. And anytime you recruit a player, I think they'll ask you if it's a good fit for the team. It depends what you pay someone, and we're not privy to that information. It's one of the reasons I'd love for salaries to become public so that we know if someone's getting $750,000 and playing 10 minutes a game, that's not what's expected. But if you've got a guy who's playing 15 minutes and scoring 8 points, to the contrary, if he's only on $80,000, he might be exceptional. So I still think there's got to be a public acknowledgement or understanding of salary like it is in the NBA, so we can really evaluate how players are going and what the expectations should be based on what they're getting paid. So that's where Xavier Cooks is being held accountable here. That's where Matthew Dellavedova will be held accountable here. Maybe the guy that should be held most accountable at Sydney's Bull Qual, because he hasn't done anything this year.
Love that insight. And I feel like Sydney are a team. I do have a question. And I asked Brian Gorgon this in a press conference, and I think he thought I meant on court, but I probably meant off it. They seem to be a team that mentally cannot close out a close game. You look back at round 2 against Cairns, they lost that one. Every time they go to Melbourne, it seems to be the inability to close out a game, unlike teams like Melbourne United, where, you know, they're up against it, they hit a winning shot, it just seems to roll for them. Is that a mental piece? Is that a structural piece? Is that personnel? What is the next over the line thing?
I think it'll only take one. I think it'll only take one game, but you go back to the Melbourne Adelaide game if we're talking about the two best teams in the league right now. And the 2 game-winning opportunities Melbourne took and were available, had the talent to take, were both 3-point shots. And it was a knockout rebound by Jesse Edwards to get the secondary 3-point shot in the corner. So that's what Sydney are missing, the knockdown shooter, that when the floor shrinks at the end of a game, they can kick it out and knock that thing down. So United and Adelaide had shooters all over the court in the final possessions of the game, and they had athletes who can get to the rim. I think Sydney have only got half of that. They're not sure who those perimeter guys are. So a little bit like we've already mentioned, it's not quite as balanced as it needs to be. And I think Gorge and the coaching staff need one of those perimeter guys to step up and say the best option you've got when you look down the bench for someone to space the floor is me. I think that's why they recruited Bull Qual. It hasn't been him. They've got a step to go, but I think it'll only take one.
Okay, good to know. The tip for Brisbane and Sydney, what's your tip?
Sydney. I'll always back Sydney coming off a bad loss. I know how that system goes after a bad loss. We've already seen it once this year, and they came out and killed Perth from memory, I think it was. But I think we see a bounce-back game from the Kings.
What about in Melbourne on Monday?
No, Melbourne. I don't think Sydney. I don't think Sydney with that. If they came away splitting this weekend, I reckon the message would be, let's go and get Brisbane. Let's not even look at Melbourne till after Brisbane. Once we've taken care of that, we get a free swing. And I think that'll be the mentality that Melbourne for the Sydney Kings is a free swing. A win under our belt. We feel good about ourselves. We fly down to Melbourne. We rest up. We don't do anything on court. We have a look at Melbourne because no one expects us to win. And it's a fun environment to play in sometimes when absolutely nobody expects you to win. I think it might be one that they do a little bit better than what people think, but not good enough to win.
Chris, it's Halloween, so I want to ask a bit of a scary question. Some people might not want to answer it, but I feel like you're up for it. We talk about coaches, potentially Brian Goorjian has been under pressure. Petteri Koponen, is he under pressure? Adam Ford after last night. We've spoken about the imports a lot. Are there coaches at the moment that are under pressure, or, you know, is where their team's sitting where they're meant to be?
Coaches are always under pressure with private ownership because changes can be made at the drop of a hat, and probably just in general, I think coaches are always under pressure. I think with the rosters they've got, look, I've mentioned the idea of New Zealand building an all New Zealand roster, but whether or not that's Paul Hanare or Kurt Penny sitting in the background with an opportunity, the part of me would love to see that built. I love Aaron Ford's transparency. I really do, and I really enjoy him as a coach. But it was him that came out after round 2 and said, if we lose, I get fired. He sort of built a rod for his own back when he made that comment, I think, and it also gave the ownership group an out. Gorge will walk away when he needs to walk away, and he'll be smart enough to know when that is. But he's still the best guy for that job, and I think on top of guiding the Sydney Kings, in his mind, hopefully to a playoff spot this year, I think one of the biggest parts of his role this year is educating Andrew Bogut to be the Sydney Kings next head coach. We all know that's going to happen, but he needs to spend a little bit of time, pick Goorjian's brain a lot longer, and I think in time, Andrew Bogut will be an exceptional head coach in this league. His IQ's off the charts, but the longer he can work with Goorjian, the better. I'm looking forward to that transaction as well, and I think they'll know when the time is, but even when Gorge got ejected, not many people spoke about the fact it was Andrew Bogut that took the reins, not Billy Tomlinson. And Billy Tomlinson's been Gorge's assistant for decades. So under pressure, no. There's a succession plan in place at Sydney. I'm not sure what it is in Cairns. They took months to rename Aaron Ford after he resigned. Maybe it is a hard thing to come back to a job you resigned from. As for the others, I think everyone's tracking about where they should. So under pressure, Dean Vickerman will tell you he's under pressure because his pressure's changed to winning a championship now. It's just a different kind of pressure. I wouldn't be firing anyone at the moment.
Chris, it's always an absolute pleasure to have you on NBL Now. I sit here in awe of your takes sometimes. Absolutely love sitting here and talking to you. So thank you so much for your time, Chris, and enjoy the weekend of Indigenous Round.
Thanks, Kels. Happy Halloween, and I sure will.